Good afternoon, everybody. We'd like to welcome you to the SoftCo webinar, Game-Changing Trends, Reshaping Accounts Payable. We're just going to give it 1 minute for people to join here. And I know some people are dialing in from different locations, so good afternoon or good morning, depending where you're coming from. And we'll just give it a moment. See numbers joining here. Okay, I think we're nearly up to full registration there, Gareth.
Yeah, perfect.
I think everyone should be able to see my screen just for the interest of distraction. I think we'll go on off camera, Gareth, and just talk through the relevant trends. And what we'd like to do first is just talk about some of the key areas just for 1 or 2 minutes in a quick intro, and a little bit obviously about SoftCo. I know we've got some customers here and some new people that we haven't spoken to in the past. So SoftCo are a P2P, AP and P2P company, very much driven in the AI world. And one of our key things is that we would look to work with you on your exact process control in your ERP landscape, and look to tailor our process and your problems and get both to work so that you can get a very strong process from a compliance perspective, visibility and control. And we'd like to thank some of the customers who are joining here who have worked with us over the past number of times, that have trusted us to kind of move them up the P2P maturity curve, as we say, and progress up the line. So I'm just going to go off camera, Gareth, and we can get cracking.
Yep.
So I think we have everybody, just a few more joining here. So Gareth, just to kick off, I suppose it's been a very busy year, lots of this upheaval with AI in 2025. Lots of moving parts going on. I think AI has certainly led the charge in terms of being the most disruptive topic that everybody keeps talking about and everybody keeps wanting to see how they can take advantage of. And we'll spend a few moments on that. Some legislation things coming in from an e-invoicing perspective. And I think AI and fraud nearly go hand in hand in terms of fraud has been quite disruptive, and lots of people through various different research have said that they've tried either attempted fraud or experienced fraud at different levels. So that's a key thing that people are looking to address and concern. And I think now more than ever, with the whole backdrop of consolidated world markets, tariffs and various things, working capital is becoming a key challenge in organizations to address. And also, how does AP become a value add proposition in maximizing working capital? And then obviously payments, the payment process within the whole industry and organization has become a huge change. We've seen the consumer adoption of Revolut, and you can see how quickly payments in the whole enterprise world is shifting away from the old legacy payment of a check or ACH payments that everyone's driving towards getting same-day payment process and a quicker process there. So there are some of the key ones. We'd certainly like to just drill into a couple of these individually. And I'm going to just click into the first trend here in terms of AI and GenAI, how it's moving and going forward from here. So Gareth, maybe you might give me some backdrop into some of this stuff and what you've been seeing throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all AI is all we heard here at the moment. I think people are still coming to terms with what it means for their particular function. But first of all, it's already there. A lot of AP departments are already using it in some form or other. Some interesting statistics there that you're showing in terms of only 9% of AP departments are achieving very high degrees of automation. So that 9%, first of all, tells me there's a lot of opportunity out there for AP departments to get significantly better at achieving AP automation, and AI is going to play a very important part in that. Interestingly, although only 9% of AP departments are achieving very good straight-through rates, there's still a 63% are using AI in some form or other. And I think when we look at what our customers are doing and what we're seeing in the market is people have been using maybe kind of point solutions, AI in particular areas around doing some analysis with AI tools, maybe using it in things like matching, coding, automated matching. AI definitely is very strong there, and we ourselves have been using that for over 4 years now in our solution. Other things like being able to now start to analyze invoices for particular, using it obviously for the capture of invoices, capture data from invoices. But now, with all of the data that we're able to gather and all of the power of AI that we're doing, I think what we're able to see now is if you play that forward, it's combining all of that data from a procurement point of view, from a contracts point of view, from a treasury point of view, making that data available to AI allows it to then do some really interesting analysis and provide assistance to the AP teams, whether it's identifying things like discrepancies between what's on the invoice and what's you'd agreed to in your contract document, whether that's regarding discounts or price increases being done ahead of schedule, things like that. You can really use the power of AI to start to drill that, and that's where I think it's going to go very quickly in the next year or two. So the importance of it all from an AP point of view, the effects is you need to be looking to get AI into helping you with your matching, your automation, identifying other things like anomalous transactions, like your fraud. It's got all the ability to look at your historic data and be able to very quickly identify things that are out of pattern spend or unusual transactions. So it's taking advantage of that. We'll come and talk about fraud in a bit more detail later, but I think it's moving from very much kind of point solutions around capture or matching to a broader based applying of, like you have there, cross-functional intelligence. So bringing all that data together to really transform what it does. And we're already seeing, you see that statistic there, firms seeing 19 hours per week savings when they're using AI heavily. That's an enormous productivity increase for customers. Anything that I haven't mentioned there, Killian, that you want to add in there?
No, look, I think, as I said, we've seen quite a huge adoption of it in lots of different places. I think people are struggling initially to see how they would use it and what value can bring. I think now what they're realizing is, as you said earlier on with the coding and matching, that it can give a lot more contextual data and outperform the legacy ERP matching processes. But given the power of AI, that it can be expanded into a larger data set. And ultimately, look, every AP team has been challenged to do more. And if we look about our kind of maturity matrix, we often talk about how we can give more efficiency, as in more invoices processed per person and in per annum. And if you look at the stat down the bottom, they're saving 19 hours per week per worker by speeding up tasks by 31% and using AI in some capacity. So all of this is kind of a cumulative effect, and I think using APAutomation with AI is kind of a two-sided thing. There is very much, a couple of years ago, we had solutions like doing RPA and bots and different things. I think it's become more powerful than that now, that it has an ability to interpret and inherit a huge more data source.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll move on.
Okay, I think we're going to talk about e-invoicing, but maybe before we do, it'd be interesting just to get a little check-in with our attendees as to where they are in the journey. So I'm just going to launch a very brief poll there, just going to ask where you currently are in your APAutomation journey. Are you using any forms of APAutomation, either with AI or without AI? Are you just looking to adopt it, or have you already implemented something? So you should see a poll question appearing on your screen there. It'd be great if you were able to just respond to that, and just to give us a bit of context as to where everybody is. So appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I'm going to close it, and I think we're seeing a pretty good mix of people at different stages in the journey. across the board. So that's very useful. So thank you for that. Okay, so if AI is one thing we've all been hearing about a lot, the other thing which we're constantly being asked more and more as the years gone on, Cillian, I think is about e-invoicing. What does it mean for our customers or companies out there? So I think it'll be interesting just to drill into that a bit and see what does it mean for companies, this increasing use of e-invoicing.
Yeah, I suppose, look, e-invoicing has been around a long time. We're working with customers, particularly in the Nordic region, in Finland and different areas for the last 10, 15 years, kind of in that space where there's two e-invoice formats. One is called payables and the other is called FinInvoice. So as people may be aware, Finnish government is a customer of ours, and that whole Finnish, Swedish markets are very much dominated by a whole e-invoice concept. The concept of a paper document in OCR and receiving an invoice by email is very much gone for many years. And then if you look at Latin America, they've adopted that in 2003, 2004, so they're into 20 years of adoption. So the main purpose of it is to combat tax fraud and improve compliance. Denmark obviously has been very much in the business to government e-invoicing mandates in 2005, and Italy became on the B2B in 2019. So from a landscape perspective, over 80 countries have looked at kind of deploying this and having an adoption. I think the benefits for business are very much about cost reduction. So the average cost per invoice is 10 to 15 euros per paper invoice. So if you look at doing this with an electronic invoice, you can reduce the cost to under €1. Look, it's about faster. We spoke earlier about using AI. Everyone's looking to get it done faster, better accuracy, less queries. Then we have compliance and reporting, secure process from a fraud perspective, sustainability, obviously a new thing that a lot of people look at from ESG. But look, there's loads of benefits. It's just that we're very much at a critical mass, not being adopted yet. But we've seen huge transition away from paper. When COVID unfortunately came along, we had a huge transition where everyone overnight was emailing invoices to every business. I think in the next 5 years, we'll see a huge transition to e-invoicing, given the mandates coming across all the different countries. And look, that's going to have a big impact. I think companies need to be ready for it and need to be ready for the rollout. It's going to start small and you'll have a lot of transactions below the radar. We've probably 25, 30 customers utilizing e-invoicing at various degrees at the moment. If they were doing 100,000 transactions as a sample invoice pool, you're probably looking at 5% of your invoices coming through an e-invoice network. Out in the European context, obviously as a Finnish government and all those are all e-invoicing, but it's growing and it's growing quicker than people realize. So I think by the end of 2026, we'll see a big footprint improvement. And in the next 5 years, I think it's going to change dramatically. There's a lot of information out there. We have a lot of information on it about what the different countries. Belgium is the new one that everyone is on about for January 2026. So we have a number of customers that are ready and compliant and up and running in that whole world. But then across America as it's coming. And I think the e-invoice is certainly being driven from a government and a mandate perspective, but there's lots of e-invoicing networks that this will open up, and the adoption of those become an awful lot bigger and stronger then as well. So overall, look, there's people need to be ready, but the benefits are huge, and particularly if we can shift a huge amount of people across the border to the e-invoicing process. When it gains a certain level of traction, I think it could be hugely adopted very, very quickly. In the short term, it's probably a little bit messy because people need to be able to handle lots of different formats. So paper, email, and an e-invoice or beyond a network. So Payable is the European standard, is Rechnung for the German format. People are having different dates for go lives and clearance models and different things all within one system. So they're looking for AP solution providers to support them and that they have one entry point for all invoice types. So there's few different things, even without mandates. As I said, the networks is there, but in the next 18, 24 months, it's probably going to be messy until there's a big shift across. But then when it all settles down, I think that the benefits are huge in terms of the adoption, and ultimately all of these processes are about making the processing of the invoice a far cleaner, simpler, more efficient process, and that's where e-invoicing is going to deliver in spades. But it's just going to take time to get a critical mass on it.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot of fear about it, that actually when you look at each country in particular and work out what needs to be done, it's actually not as bad as people are feared of. The biggest thing is people are feared of is the unknown, but actually when you start to look at what they need to do, and we're very excited that with what we can provide is a kind of one-stop shop to help you connect to all the networks as they roll along. And I think that's where you need to be looking from an AP point of view, is you don't want to be having to reinvent the wheel for each of the countries as the mandate to come into effect, that you want to be taking decisions now that will not only help you.
Yeah, and look, we're lucky as well. We have a big partnership with Tungsten. We have a global network, and one of the key things is they work with all the local government jurisdictions and make sure that the Tungsten network is compliant with all the local regulations. So if you are operating in a country, you don't need to worry about any of that. If you utilize SoftCo, who are backed onto the Tungsten network, we will automatically make sure you're compliant with all the local legislation requirements in each jurisdiction. So moving on, Gareth, to the trend 3, payments, fraud, AI-driven attacks. Do you want to talk a bit through that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's any customer. It used to be a few years ago, people wouldn't tell you that they've been subject to a fraud attack because it was seen as kind of embarrassing or something to be kept very hidden. I think now, Killian, when we talk to customers or prospective customers, they're pretty open. Everybody will admit they've been subjected to it, and quite a few of them will admit that they've bitten the hook and fallen for it and lost money as a result. I think it's just so prevalent out there. It's a significant risk to businesses out there. And I think there's a number of different ways in terms of phishing attacks, people imitating existing vendors, check fraud, those push payment scams, lots of different ways they can manifest it. But ultimately, when a fraud happens, it's usually down, when you trace it back, it's down to a failure of controls, either because your controls weren't properly deployed, or they weren't being followed, or the people trying to implement them are overwhelmed. And now I think there's a combination of things that will help you deal with that. There's things like the VOP scheme in the EU, where you can more easily validate the name and IBAN to make sure you make that the payment you're making to a particular account is that the account is owned by who you think it is. So that in itself has been a very important piece. But now, even from organizations' own practices around how they manage vendor payment changes, etc., there's a lot of things that you can do out there in terms of moving away from the old paper form that somebody'd fill in and sign and it would get passed around, or even that became a PDF form. There's now secure online AI-driven processes where they can validate that the vendor who's applying to become a new vendor to you is who they say they are, that they can validate that the information they provided is valid, so that you can make sure that the companies you think you're dealing with are who they are. And then on a transaction by transaction basis, that AI again is going to be at the forefront, is already at the forefront of spotting anomalous transactions, amounts that don't tally with what you usually pay to that particular vendor. So somebody's maybe sending in an email for an inflated amount, an invoice for an inflated amount, and trying to get you to pay it into a different account. So ultimately, I think what it boils down to is using technology and also putting in place processes to take advantage of the technology to make your payment process secure, using modern ways of paying, moving away from checks, because I think that's in its own category of being liable to fraudulent attacks. But there's a lot of things we're happy to talk to you about that you can do both in the initial upfront control and then on the day-to-day processing to make sure you're not making payments that you shouldn't be making. And as I said, there's a lot of scare stories. I've even heard a story of a person in the AP department getting a call from what looked like a board meeting, and it was an AI generated video of what looked like members of the board telling them to make a payment. So when you're dealing with that level, you really need to have your wits about you, and you also need to have humans in the loop making the changes, but you need to have them informed about what they need to be looking for. So anyway, there's a lot going on, but there's a lot you can do to address it.
I think for me, I think the main thing is as you said, the VOP, the verification of payment, payee scheme has been a huge thing in Europe. But I think from an AP and P2P process, lots and lots of customers and lots of prospects we would speak to have a huge supplier base of a couple of different thousand suppliers, and they're actively engaged in dealing with these and paying these on a day-to-day basis, and people are screaming for vendor onboarding and possibly more vendor management to say, can you give me a tool to verify the bank details are as per the name on the bank account, and that all that is tallying. So vendor management and vendor onboarding is hugely becoming a critical part of the process, and it's seen as probably a weak point in a lot of people's process because it's a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet. And I think given the tools and the validations that are available in the market now for checking sanction lists, bank details, company house information, all of that, it's providing a real-time picture on the vendor status, and that in turn is giving confidence back to the AP user that the vendor is clean and approved, and there's no pinholes in the vendor that you're being presented with, so they feel comfortable making a payment or sending an invoice for approving for payment there. So I suppose this all feeds into trend 4. I know there's another question, Garrett.
Yeah, I might just quickly pop up a question on how people are using, if people are using AI to detect fraud currently, or if that's something that they're exploring. So again, you should see a question on your screen there. Just while that question is up, I'll also point out that in your webinar control tab, there's a question section. So feel free to pop in any questions that you might want to ask, and we'll try and get to those at the end as well. But yeah, if you could answer that question that's just on screen now, that would be fantastic. And we'll then move on to talking about trend 4. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so the next trend is the working capital pressure that is both a challenge and an opportunity for AP. So, Killian, if you want to maybe talk us through what you're seeing there and what the opportunities are for AP departments and what they need to do to take advantage of those opportunities.
I suppose, look, we did a lot of work with the Hackett Group and doing a number of research projects this year for APAutomation and trends, and this is kind of where a lot of this information came to light. So there is, for anyone that wants to look, there's a Hackett white paper link you can download from our website, and we can share with you. But ultimately, people are looking at saying, what working capital do I have, and how do I maximize it? And I think that's the whole thing, that the cash conversion cycle is worsening. People are looking to see, how do I maximize the capital I have? So high interest rates, tariffs, as we know from Trump administration and all different areas, supply chain disruption are putting everybody on the back foot. And as I said, we did a lot of work with Hackett this year, and all of this is saying, look, AP optimization can assist and help with that. And this was one of the key finance study objectives that they had. How AP is going to play its part, I suppose, really is that you're going to decide with treasury function and look at, feeds back into your supplier setup, your terms, all the moving parts, and then that you link in with treasury to say, when's the best time to pay, to get early discounts on time, are you taking advantage of full terms? And that's all based on your current cash position. So that's a critical part of seeing AP as a huge value add function, as opposed to just a processing engine. And look, we spoke around about payments to a degree, but there's a huge shift towards switching to virtual cards that has the ability to generate cashback and rewards for APs and ultimately turn into a revenue driver as opposed to a processing function, as I said. So B2B virtual cards are projected to grow dramatically. There's a lot of upside for them. There's a lot of these payment providers now will ask you for your supplier base and say, did you know X amount of these suppliers are already active using these type of payments or receiving payments? So people are initially slow to adopt them, but when they see the value of them, they start quite quickly seeing that, look, there's a way forward with these. And look, APAutomations enables faster invoice approval, but ultimately what that means is that a business can go to their suppliers and say, if we were able to pay you sooner, would you give us an additional? We can pay you in 10 days instead of 30 days. Would you give us an additional 2% or 1%? And people's AP ledgers are quite significant. 2% of 100 million. It's easy to do the maths on that at 2 million. But if you can pull 2 million back into your business at a net bottom line, it's a huge benefit. And I think people are looking at that now saying, okay, what's our cash position? How do we maximize that to get more money back in? So automation, AI, all the things we've spoke about drive that position for a lot of the finance teams, and are now AI, as you said earlier on, can also start looking at, well, how do I optimize payments and working capital and take the most out of it? So it's a huge thing, but ultimately you need a good core underlying process in AP and automation to support it. But AP teams are being pushed down that avenue to say, how come we're not realizing this, and how much value have we been leaving on the table, and how do we start to adopt this? So overall, it's a shift. I think in the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to see a huge uplift for the relevant departments, but it's going to bring real value and real benefit back to the clients. And I think it broadens the integration of the AP team across the whole finance function, with treasury, payments, all the procurement functions, that all those departments aren't working in their own silos. They'll become far more integrated as a function.
Great.
So I think that main part there, sorry.
Yeah, and I think it kind of leads into the final one we had there, which was around payments themselves. That kind of, it's all of what we're talking about with the other 4 topics. There's an increased expectation then around faster payments, real-time payments, even being able to support that if you want to take advantage, first of all, if you start by getting your internal AP processes in order through the use of AI, through the use of e-invoicing, that puts you in a position to be able to take advantage of early payment discounts. But then on the flip side, there's an expectation there from your suppliers that you're going to pay them in a way that gets the funds to them very quickly. So I think it's been able to support those payment expectations, and either real-time or near real-time payments where you're able to make the funds transfer in an efficient way. So that requirement, where it's coming into the expectations of your suppliers to be paid quickly, puts more of an onus on all those things you were talking about in terms of making sure that the matching of invoices to POs happens very quickly and efficiently and accurately, that your approval windows, both of the invoice and maybe the payment run, is done in an efficient way. You need to have a very high proportion of your invoices going straight through by virtue of the AI, etc., and e-invoicing to get you there. So I think if you want to be able to manage your working capital, if you want to be able to work and get those discounts, etc., and to be able to meet the payment requirements of your suppliers, it's getting all of those things right that will support that. So it's getting your workflows right in terms of why AP matters. Why it matters to AP rather is getting your workflows right, working closely with Treasury, making sure your data flows and data structures are clean, and having automation in place, making sure your automation is good and in place to give you what you need. So I think a lot of it's kind of the natural culmination of those other 3 or 4 trends that we've talked about as well.
Yeah, and I think, look, the function of AP, as I said, is broadening, and that everything has to be a lot more integrated. There's not a lot more silos, that it's not just the invoice coming in and preparing it for payment, then handing it to treasury for a payment run. All that data is becoming far more interlinked. But as we've kind of learned, is that all the approvals and validations must happen upstream, and you must be confident that the invoice is being submitted to you with all the relevant validations complete, and ultimately that you're passing an approved, validated, verified, whatever term you want to use, clean transaction ready for payment. So when you do hit the payment button, that you're absolutely crystal clear and 100% confident that this is good to go, that you're not exposing yourself in the payment process, because the push for real-time payment is coming, but that's also pushing that the controls are a lot stronger upstream. I know we have one more poll there, Gareth, question that
yeah, what I might do is maybe launch that while we look at some of the questions that people have submitted, and then we can, after we've launched the poll, maybe talk through one or two of those questions. Is that work? Yeah, okay. So it's really, this next question is really just about where you are, if you'd like us to talk about. We'd be delighted to talk to anybody here about some of the topics we've talked about there, give you some advice and guidance, explain what's available now, what's coming, what we think based on maybe your particular needs you'd need to prioritize. So feel free to just let us know when you'd, if you'd like us to reach out immediately or in the near future. And just while that poll's on, there's a few questions there. One question, which is a good question, which we do get asked, is with all this talk of e-invoicing, does that do away with the need for all of your automatic matching and processing? Is it going to literally allow you to post invoices straight from from receiving an e-invoice straight into your finance system? That's a good question. I think the short answer is it only unfortunately gets you the invoice data quicker. You still need to validate that what you've received is a valid invoice, that you're able to match it to a PO. If it's a PO invoice, that you've actually received those goods, if you're doing a three-way match. So it's a very important first step in getting the invoice data as efficiently as possible, and it should be nice clean data, which will make it very straightforward to validate it quickly. But you're still going to find that there's going to be exceptions that you need to make sure you're managing as well. So I think that it'll definitely play a significant part in increasing efficiency, but it doesn't do away with the need to be handling exceptions and validations as necessary. Other question there, how much internal data do we need to train an AP model effectively? I don't know if you have any thoughts, or you want me to talk to that one as well, or?
Yeah, no, I'll leave you take the AI one, since you the AI topic earlier on, if you don't mind, Gareth.
Yeah. I mean, I think the great thing about AI is if you can build your models correctly, it can take in a lot of very fuzzy data. So we're seeing it being used for things like bringing in your company compliance documents around your procurement practices, your contract documents. So a lot of that stuff is information you already have, and then maybe getting a feed of historical invoice data, historical order data. A lot of that information, while there may already be ways that you're producing that into some kind of data lake. So in my experience, we've been able to, as we've built our models, we've been able to train it with a lot of ready-made data. When we've looked at it in more narrow applications, we've been able to develop ready-to-go models. So for the matching process, for example, there's a lot of models that can work without needing to be pre-trained as well. So each AI model does not necessarily need to be pre-trained with your data. There are ways that we can deploy AI to start working very effectively without having seen your data before it's able to use past learnings from other data to do that as well. So I think it'll, don't be put off by the fact that you're going to have to train. There are ways that we can certainly get you there very quickly, shorten that process if there is any training time needed at all. Okay. I think final question there was kind of what our thoughts are around e-invoicing in the US market. There is obviously.
I think there's a huge footprint of e-invoicing networks in the US market, albeit there's not a compliance mandate there. And I think that's growing use, particularly in large enterprise companies. But people are starting to realize that there's a huge upside to it. And if you've got European operations that have mandates being imposed from a legal point of view, it's an opportunity to adopt it in the EU, but also to do an assessment of your current vendor profile in the US and see where you can maximize that on both sides.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. We've probably, I mean, I think we've gone past the half hour we were setting ourselves as a target, but I think we've covered quite a lot in that time. So thank you, everybody, for your attendance and your attention. We hope to have the opportunity to speak to you very shortly.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining and wish you all a very happy Christmas. If you have any questions, please submit them to us. And if you'd like some of the content we shared today, please reach out and we can share that directly with you as well. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.